So that's how it worked in our family. So everybody was intermarried to each other. All cousins were married to cousins.
When I first started, we used to be given men's golf shirts to wear on air. It didn't feel like I could say anything. I felt like I was almost grateful to be there, to be accepted, which is sad when I think about it.
You guys met an MBA school class.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, where does doctorship and MBA fit in? Because it sounds like a business, for me, I've always imagined it as a business degree.
Right, yeah.
Just like how I'm imagining PhD, I'm in tech, so I'm imagining PhD, tech, Dr. Dube in technology. It kind of clashes. I know why Sam was in MBA school. I'm trying to figure out, as a doctor, what the purpose of going to an MBA would be, ...
Yeah.
Okay, so with me, the reason why I was actually messing around. I was lonely in private practice. So I'd been in private practice for quite some time, and then I thought, what else can I study? I generally like to study.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I said, no, I'll just apply for this, and then, but I'm not going to write that exam. There was some exam that you had to write. I said, I'll just put my name down, send it in, and see what happens. So then they called me. And they said, please don't register for that exam because you actually have all the points.
Oh.
And then I was like, okay. So I said to my husband, hey, listen, I got into this FITS MBA, but I don't know how it's going to be. So he says, no, just go and see how it goes because you're always saying that you're lonely in private practice.
Right.
So, and I used to be in academia as well. So prior to being in private practice at FITS, I was always with students and other residents. And, you know, it was a joyful experience, but the moment you're in private, it's you and the patient, and your colleagues work on their own. So it's a very lonely space. So that's why I registered for that. And then, then I thought, I'm not going to pay the full fee. I'll probably drop out in the first 3 months because, you know, I have no idea about business. And then when I went into the class and I met all the ladies and some of the guys, and yeah, we developed relationships and I learned so much about business, and it also helped me to manage my practice in a more profitable way.
There it is.
That's where it
But, you know...
And also it was an extra degree.
It sounds like you study for fun. And for me, I know I studied for money. I want to get myself out of poverty. I want to afford the things I like, the hair, the nails. So for someone to say, oh, I study because I like to study, I'm just like, girl, is there a story there? What's going on?
Because I was lonely.
Because I was lonely?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Heard of the shops?
Well, yes, but you know, like I was, look, I've come from that background where I'm from Limpopo, a small little town it's called Louis Trichardt. So I was a top achiever in school, right up to, we used to call it Standard 5, and then after Standard 5, we had no matric, and no Standard 6 up to matric. So I came from quite a well-to-do family, but when my dad passed away, I was 13 years old, and the family that we came from was very orthodox, so the girls never went out to study. They were married as soon as they got their first period.
In South Africa?
In South Africa, in Limpopo. So by the age of 13, when you get your period, you sort of booked off to your first cousin.
Yeah. For what?
To get married. And then you are taken care of by the family. So you don't work, you don't study, you're basically a housewife. So
how old is this cousin?
So the cousin will be about 18. Yeah, it's about
Children.
18. Yeah. So that's how it worked in our family. So everybody was intermarried to each other. All cousins were married to cousins. And so because I was a top achiever in my primary school, I decided I want to study. I wanted to do medicine from the day I could study. And then when I got to Standard 5, my dreams were all crushed because my dad passed away. I had my period. So I knew that, okay, now this is what's going to happen because now the family took over the management of our family. And we didn't have a high school and we were not allowed to go out. And then for a week in Standard 6, I sat at home and then I would walk to my school and tell my principal and my Afrikaans teacher, Mrs. Rousseau, I used to say to her, listen, Mrs. Rousseau, I want to study, I want to become a doctor, but there's no high school in this area, and I can't go anywhere.
And you also don't have the money for school fees if you're saying that.
Yeah, because everything was kept within the family structure. So if you needed something, you would have to reach out and ask for things.
Permission to go to school. I didn't even realize that things like that are happening in South Africa. I think you always hear these kind of stories in, overseas or African countries where, child marriages are still happening. In my head, I'm like, oh, in South Africa, we got the laws. And you kind of don't think that these kind of things are going on.
Yeah.
And so for you, that drive was to just like, I need to get out of here, let me go to school.
Yes. And, I'm the eldest of 6 children. I didn't want my siblings to also go through that, where now suddenly they would have to marry a cousin the moment that they have their period. So then, part of that journey, I used to speak to Mrs. Rousseau, and then we decided to build a standard 6, 7, 8, 9, and we got to matric. And of my class, we were 10 scholars, but all 9 of the other scholars were either excluded from other schools, so they weren't academic achievers. They ended up just being in my class because no other school would take them.
Oh my goodness.
School of misfits.
Of last resort.
Yes.
So then eventually, we built class by class and we climbed. Mrs. Rousseau used to help with tuitions, and her husband was in the Hoër school. He used to help us with maths and that. And eventually we got to the matric class, but I didn't have money for textbooks. I didn't have money for extra lessons for matric. So because we were a group of 10, they used to have this thing called Physicam, where you get your question papers for matric. And if you buy 10 books, you get an extra one for free. So we would, those who could afford it would allocate that job to me. I'd get onto a borrowed bicycle, ride up to the post office in town, not telling my mom because we weren't allowed to borrow bicycles. So I'd borrow the bicycle, go to the post office, order the books, and then when it comes, pick it up, and then I get the free book. And then also I would organize the tuition for these kids because some of them were quite well-to-do and they had funding. So I would organize the tuition, but I could not go and attend the class. So as soon as they come out of tuitions, I would sit outside, and whatever notes they took, I'd take it and go through it. And that's how I got through my matric. But then it didn't stop there because for medicine, there's no bursaries. So I got accepted at Wits to study medicine, and I didn't have funds.
Can I just ask you, what was happening with the proposed groom? Where was he during all of this?
So there was an allocated cousin, but I had refused.
You were allowed to refuse?
You weren't allowed to. So they thought by the time I would finish the so-called matric, I wouldn't be able to do anything because I had no funding. So I would have no other option but to get married and stay in the family. But then I applied to a charity organization in that time, and they offered to pay my university fees, but then I didn't have fees for residency. So for res, I couldn't get a res space. So then my mom came with me to Wits and literally dropped me off on the day that it was, your first day at university. She left me outside the Sunnyside residence at Wits, and she said, you will find your way. I didn't have a place to sleep. I wasn't accepted in res. I had a little bag and a bucket with some of my toiletries, and I sat on that staircase, and there were some senior final year medical students. 2 of these girls came past and they're like, what's your plan? I said, I don't have a place to sleep. I don't have res, but I'm here to start studying first year medicine. They said, no, you can sleep in our room. So they squeezed me in for a week in their rooms until I got caught.
Right.
Because you're not allowed to just bunk in somebody else's room. You need to be a student.
Registered and all
so
of
for
that.
a week. And then my GP in Louis Trichardt, Dr. Ayob, they contacted my mom and said, don't worry, we'll pay her fees. And they paid my full year of res fees so that I could study.
So you had the tuition, you had the res fees.
Yeah. And then also like with the res fees, I had only the basic res fee where you get 1 meal a day, and that's for 5 days of the week.
Yeah.
But I made friends with some of the girls that had their full scholarships paid, and they would give me the extras like for dinner.
Yeah.
So they would take extra rolls for me and things and literally give it to me. Yeah, and
but how did it feel? I mean, I'm sitting here in shock and I'm thinking, you know, the story is terrible enough and terrifying enough. But you know, when you're in uni, you know, you've got that swag. You've got that swag as a young person. You know, you're in university, you're in first year, you're studying medicine. Obviously, people know you're smart. You know I was at UCT and med school students, they had their own campus and they thought that they walk on water, right? And how did it affect you receiving handouts?
so look, when I was in that so-called high school after my dad passed away, we had become so deficient in terms of funds that we would get drop-offs at home in terms of food, clothing. Your other fellow people from the community would drop off their old clothes. So I had become accustomed to that. That was my normal. So if somebody gave me an extra roll or an extra bit of butter, I had become accustomed to receiving. It felt terrible as a student, but nobody knew my background, nobody judged me. The girls were just happy that I was part of the group and they would support. They could see my situation and they would help. And even when it came to textbooks, I couldn't afford textbooks at medical school. So apart from using some of the books at the library, some of the girls would borrow me their books and I would study at night when they're sleeping. And then, you know, I would work out question papers as like a bartering system. So I work out all the answers for the question papers and then they would borrow me textbooks. So it became like a barter system. But yeah.
You know, sometimes we can take for granted the opportunities we've been given to live out our dreams, either as a woman in technology or someone who's a former banker. And, you know, the journey I took through my accounting degrees and my MBAs to get where I am. And hearing the story of Dr. Tahira Hasim really highlighted for me the privilege that education is and continues to be.
Absolutely, and Profmed is a medical aid that understands that the education journey is not overnight.
Yep.
It's step by step by step. And with them, they allow you to be the professional and they take care of the medical side.
So you can focus on being great because you have worked so hard for it.
I just feel like your life has been one stumbling block of patriarchal obstacles after the other.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming at this point, your family's been cut off because you're at school and no one's abiding.
Yeah.
And here you are. Do you find that when you moved into the workplace, and I can speak even on my own experiences about patriarchal structures in the workplace, and I'm sure anyone watching this can say the same, where I feel like I'm not taken seriously. And I'll go back to a story where I was the SME for an app that was used, still is used around the world.
What's an SME or SMA?
A subject matter expert.
Okay.
For an app, and this guy from the US phones and says, oh, I was told to talk to you because you know about ABCD, and we had a whole discussion. He's like, I don't know that, I don't like that, can I speak to the SME? And I'm like, but you're speaking to her. Because he didn't like the answers I was giving. All of a sudden, I'm no longer the professional that he was told to come to.
Yes.
And so just going back to all these sort of patriarchal obstacles in your life growing up, does that then now translate to you as a doctor, and maybe even to you, Leigh, with your presenting? And I mean, you were in sports for the longest time, and sports to this day is such a male-dominated field. That experience, I'm just wondering how it shows up for you.
I do sometimes feel that it is the boys' club. I feel like over the last 10 years or so, we made progress, but suddenly we've introduced the concept of influencers. So all of a sudden we have these people coming in who tweet and do stuff, and I feel like women in sports journalism has taken a back step. You know, where it's okay to, you know, take the pictures and, you know, it's not about having a deep knowledge of the subject matter and being taken seriously for the fact that you are a journalist. So it does make me sad, you know, but I think it's the reality of being in this male-dominated environment.
Yeah, sports broadcasting, I mean, sports in general, we know that sports men will get more money, bigger sponsorships, bigger funding than sports women. But a field like medicine, one would think, because, you know, it's altruistic human beings that want to do good on earth, save lives. Do you guys find that there is a little bit of...
There is definitely a male dominance issue. Look, I mean, when I started initially I didn't want to be an obstetrician.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something easy because I said to myself, I've had a hard life, I'm going to do dermatology or radiology. But
no offense to dermatologists and radiologists.
But some, like, you know, it was not as taxing as, it's not a taxing field like a surgical field.
Right, okay.
So in that sense, where I thought, I'll have my times, I'll make lots of money, and I'll be relaxed. But somehow my path always took me back to obstetrics. Because when I was an intern, the first day that I arrived at Chilidzini Hospital, they put me into a ward full of women. And they said, oh, you're the female intern, deal with this. Oh, wow. I was terrible in obs and gynae as a student. I didn't like it. Because
but it was assumed, oh, you're a woman,
you're a woman, this is your field. So I didn't have much knowledge, but I had my little book and I used to read and do things for these women, do their cesareans, their gynae surgeries. Because as an intern, you worked as a surgeon, you worked as the doctor of everything. So we used to get seniors that would help us and teach us to operate and things. But then I became so skilled in obs and gynae. Then I applied to Baragwanath for my ComServe and I applied for family medicine. They didn't put me in family medicine first day. You get there. Obs and gynae, why? Because you can cut a Caesar, you know how to do a scan, you know how to do an emergency hysterectomy. So I
triple threat.
Yes. So I was like, okay, great. Now you arrive there. And you're this young little intern, female intern. The scrub sisters would not hand the knife to me. I had to get a letter from the head of department to say that I'm skilled. But if it was a male registrar, they would hand the knife. They hand the knife to the medical student who was male. But me, as a skilled medical officer, they would not hand the knife. I had to come and do my calls with a little piece of paper and say, this is from my prof, I am proficient in surgery. Even the day that I became a consultant, I was at Rahima Musa Hospital and I was there to teach the interns how to do surgery. And they handed over the knife to the 4th year medical student. And he said, sister, I'm not a doctor. That's the consultant. You need to give her the knife. So it's not only males that influence the environment, it's females as well.
Yeah.
If we make a difference by upskilling other females and also appreciating their values, then we can break this vicious cycle. But for as long as we carry on with this imbalance, we'll always have the male dominance. Not to say that males are bad with surgery, they have their skills, but we as women also have a place.
Yeah, and you mentioned how sometimes it is actually women that will continue the toxicity in the workplace, that will continue upholding, patriarchal or even oppressive practices against women in the home. And I want to hear from you ladies, like, how do you feel that the women in your career could have supported you better? Like, what role do we play and can we play as leaders now in our fields in supporting other women? Shaz, you're in tech. Like, do you see the sisters in STEM coming through?
Very little, because I started working 11 years ago now, and even when I started working as an intern, I happened to be the first black intern under the age. So I'm always finding myself wherever I go, I'm the first black under the age of, and even to this day, at the ripe age of 32, I'm still young, but yes. I was actually in a Strat meeting the other day.
Yeah.
And I was a little fashionably late, but they were still eating breakfast. And I get there and I walk into the room and I'm like, oh, again, I'm the only black female person under the age of 40 in the room. And it kind of triggers something in you, because at my last job, I made it a point when interns came in, because I was the first intern, so I knew that they were going to use me as a benchmark. If I do well, they'll bring in more people like me.
Yeah.
If I don't, it kind of then shifts them to not hire people like me. So I knew I was carrying sort of that weight on my shoulders. But I had what I like to call a little induction for girls, particularly girls that came from my type of background, who were shy to speak to CEOs, because in this job you need to, a CEO will ask you in the lift, how's this project going? You can't do that. So we used to have little sessions with them. I'd take them out for, hey, let's go to Seattle. And sometimes that little tete-a-tete chat will help someone so much, because I knew that these girls need to continue this after me. They must do it for someone else and someone else. Because at the end of the day, I want to be 40 sitting in a boardroom with them and not with the same boys club that I've always been sitting with. So mentorship for me, as much as I didn't get it because I was always the first coming in, I knew that I had the responsibility of continuing something once I've gone.
That's so deep. That's so deep. Leigh-Ann?
Yeah, I was actually hired at Supersport by a woman.
Nice.
Which I found quite interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know
that era.
Yeah. So I actually don't know if they just decided they wanted another woman, because at that time, the only other female presenter that I was aware of was Tinky Pringle. And I remember watching her, as a young girl in East London, watching her on Supersport, thinking, wow, this woman is amazing, and then just deciding that I was going to forge this path. And I mean, even at university where I was studying journalism, everybody was like so open and accepting of the fact that this young girl wanted to be a sports journalist, which was amazing. And I mean, even when I was there, I was part of the campus radio station, and I eventually was the sports editor. And yeah, it was amazing. I didn't feel like there was anything stopping me. I think also from just a work environment point of view, I didn't really pick up too much resistance from, colleagues. I do remember once meeting the husband of a friend, and at that point I was doing Formula One, and he came to me and he said, do you just read?
Like a teleprompter.
Yeah, do you just read the teleprompter?
What do you know about Formula One?
Yeah, I was like, no, we don't use teleprompters. We just speak about it. And he was so gobsmacked.
Oh, a woman speak about Formula One. What do you know?
Yeah, that actually knows what she's talking about. And it's sad for me that there is that perception. And I think that's probably one of the things that we need to fight against the hardest, is just the common man out on the street. Do I have credibility when you look at me as a woman? So it's about changing people's perceptions out there about the job that I do. And, as I get older now as well, I feel more the pressure, not being like a young 20 or 30 or 40-year-old to kind of, so what do you bring to the party then if you're not young and preppy and pretty?
My brains are not enough?
No, but is that something we're putting on ourselves? Could it be? Could it be that also sometimes as women, we overemphasize the fact that I'm a woman? Do we wear that? Is it confirmation bias where you're walking around saying, oh, I'm a young black woman, or I'm a young white woman, I'm a young Muslim, whatever. And then if someone says one thing, that now highlights that, it's like, there, I knew it. You see me as a woman. Or maybe if they say, oh my gosh, you look at, I love the hair. So I'm like, oh, it's because I'm a woman. You didn't compliment Bruce on his hair. Do we sometimes wear that too much, do you think?
I don't know. I can't say it for me, because I always see it from a standpoint where it's like, I know there are people that want to break into where I am, but they're not given the opportunity to do so. And that's why I took it upon myself. I don't wear it as like a cape or I'm the first black. I'm actually tired of being, I want more. I'm tired of being the first, the first.
It's not cute.
Join me, please.
First 3 LinkedIn updates. Like, we know.
Yeah. So for me, it's definitely not from the perspective of self-interrogation or carrying that. But it's an observation that I can't run away from. Like when I go into these businesses that I consult for, I look around the room and I'm like, who can I do a hey girl, with? And it's like, oh, there's nobody. So I kind of have to keep a more serious face, because maybe the guys don't get down like that, or they won't understand me.
But are we assuming? Maybe you could be like, hey John, how's it, bro?
But even
And connect with John.
the way I've dressed has changed. Like if you see me going to my consulting office now, I wear jeans and a jersey to the side because the guys don't care. Whereas before, if I'm surrounded by other women, I'm gonna show up like I look today and make a concerted effort. I've kind of just decided to slip in under the radar because I don't want to make that kind of that noise of, there's a woman in the team.
Well, you know, thinking about it, when I first started, we used to be given men's golf shirts to wear on air. So, I mean, I'm little, so even a men's small, it's
quite big.
Yeah, it's big. And it took probably about 6 or 7 years before they actually started giving us women's clothing.
Not because it wasn't available, they just weren't
Yeah,
ordering.
no, they only had men's stuff. So, you know,
Even though they had 2 female...
Absolutely.
Absurd.
Yes, you kind of just, you accept it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can be feminine, you know, like you're bringing girl stuff. Okay, so I don't have to be like a little man, you know, I can be a woman.
Do you find it was hard to speak up for yourself? I mean, 6, 7 years is a long time to be wearing oversized
Yes.
Yeah, I think I didn't feel like I could say anything. I felt like I was almost grateful to be there, to be accepted as one of the
You don't want to
guys.
shake the table.
Yeah, which is sad when I think about it.
Do you feel you could have spoken up during your journey, Taheera, to say, you know, I don't want to be in obs, I don't want to be...
At that moment, no. Because I always felt overwhelmed and I always felt like I wasn't good enough. But
So
I was
there was also
actually,
that.
yeah, but I was actually more than good enough. When I think back at the skill that I had, the journey that I had been through, I'm grateful for the women that had brought me to the point where I am. If it wasn't for Mrs. Rousseau, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for my mom pushing me and my mom saying, you got to get out of this, knowledge is power, go and study, try and do whatever you can. You must pass the year under any circumstances that hits you. You have to pass your years. You have to finish. And then also when I started my registrar time and training, I had a lovely group of senior registrars, Deshni, Cyrilla, Gabby, they were all final years. So they helped me. Because I was one of the youngest registrars, I wasn't really respected. It was like, how did she get in?
Right.
What do you know?
Yeah, like what does she know? Even when I went for my interview for the registrar post, I actually wasn't really interested in being a registrar. I wanted the salary because it was double.
Got you. Focused, honey, fully focused.
I was like, I'll just go there and then just get double the salary and I can support my family, I can do this, I can do that. And then they sort of encouraged me and then I used to always be part of their team as a junior, but the amount of skill and the amount of upliftment that they gave to me was just amazing that by the time I finished, I became the person that I am now, that I stand for my ground. Although I don't, I'm not like rude to people. I was saying to Leigh-Ann, you know, when I started in private practice, I would walk into theatre, into the tea room, and there's only guys sitting there, the surgeons, the orthopods, and you walk in there and you're like, good morning. They look at you and they just don't answer. And then I thought maybe they don't understand the word good morning. Or maybe they just don't see me, so I would say it louder and louder each time I went. And then my assistant, who was a female as well, she's like, Taheera, don't waste your time. These guys are never going to greet you.
Wow.
Now things have turned around, and like I always say, kill them with kindness. Now when I walk into that theatre tea room, it's like, hey, how's it, Taheera?
They're greeting you first.
Yeah. What's on your list today?
Yeah. Sometimes it takes time, and to be honest with you, my strategy, because I'm from a banking background, right? And being a private banker at one of South Africa's leading private banks, and I was looking after the public sector. So imagine you've got a 25-year-old Samke Mhlongo that twangs, trying to tell some government minister or some DG somewhere that, sir, you know, you can't afford this bond. It's like, excuse me?
They try to use their patriarchal structure.
Yeah,
as an elder, like, what do you mean, little girl?
Who do you like? You've got nothing. You are young. What? What are you talking about? And I realized that at the end of the day, people want to be validated. And I realized that at the end of the day, if you don't shake someone where they're uncomfortable, because it's really insecurity that presents itself as meanness and aggression, right? So be like, you know, Minister, whoever I saw in the news, you did 1, 2, 3, congratulations, your municipality, rah, rah, rah. And you're like, no, you know, I'm actually so concerned because I want to get a great deal for you. And you know, the way, if we apply now, we're not going to get a good interest rate. Let me tell you for free, let me whisper to you, they won't tell you this at the bank.
It's a secret.
But let me fill you in, because, you know, we're people. If you put down a deposit, then we can, like, oh my God, this is why I love you, you're very smart. This is why I love you, you're very smart. And you're just like, there we go. And I found that as I matured as a banker, I learned nuances, right? Because people are people and people will people. Right? They are fallible, they've got emotions, they've got biases, and that is how I, you know, instead of working against what was presented to me, I was like, okay, let me affirm you, let me say, yes, you are safe, I see you, you're a minister, you're up there, top dog.
Let me give you that.
And then let me just slide in, you know, what I need to tell you in a way that won't threaten your ego. And I want to hear from you. What are some of the tactics? So give me one tactic that has worked for you when you found yourself in an uncomfortable position in the workplace, at work, where you had to navigate. And you found that, hey, the strategy actually works for me. Like, it gets me there.
For me, it wasn't about being in a difficult position, but the way that people, especially girls behind me who were scared to talk to more senior people, I found a way to relate to them. And at the time, Game of Thrones was really big. And I know the old gents. I just happened to be a fan. And one of the days there was a joke, someone stuck a little Game of Thrones sticker of the episode the night before in the lift. And I was like, I made the joke with one of the execs in the lift. And we hit it off immediately, like, yes, this is gonna be my new thing. Every Monday, I'm gonna come in and be like, did you watch Game of Thrones? I'd literally knock on, I was like, are you busy? Did you watch Game of Thrones? But they started to relate to me in a way that is unintimidating to both of us. It's like, oh, Charmaine is a young black girl who watches Game of Thrones. And I'm like, yes. And so now that shadow of who I am, whether as a female or whatever bias, is dissipated.
We found commonality.
Yes, because now he's like, oh, she's actually pretty cool.
I love that.
But I think it is all about that, you know, about finding something in their makeup that you can really speak to. You know, whether it's having to speak to someone that's from East London, all of a sudden you kind of in there, you know, you're trying to, you know, speak about old memories and just making them feel comfortable. So whatever you can find as a strategy, I think that's the way to do it.
Is that how you've navigated Supersport?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm always everybody's friend.
Okay.
There's the one makeup artist that always says to me, like, Lee, your personality is completely different off air compared to when you're sitting in the chair and you're like, you know, good evening. And just the way I am, because I try to be everybody's friend. I just, not because I'm faking it, but because I genuinely like people.
Nice.
I love chatting to people, and I think maybe that's one of the strengths, you know, in terms of the job that I do of being a journalist and interviewing people, because I'm genuinely interested in you and your life and your story, and I think stories make the world go round. I mean, that's, you know, everybody's got a story to share.
And what a phenomenal story from Dr. Taheera. And what is your strategy, girl? Like, I mean, I can imagine some of the mistrust and some of the trauma, I guess, that comes from how the men that were meant to protect you, being your uncles, your family, you know, were the very men that were actually oppressing you and persecuting you. So how do you now navigate those spaces where perhaps you find yourself in a male-dominated, whether it be a theater or a tea room or a space, and you give that Taheera magic?
Yeah, for me, like I said, it's kill them with kindness. I mean, all these obstacles that have come in my way were actually, they were more like blessings, because I changed the obstacle into a blessing and I found a pathway to make it work. So anything that I encounter, if it's a bad thing or the way they speak to me, I try and twist it around and make a positive come out of it. And I may be, you know, a successful obstetrician, or I may have this skill or that skill, but I still remain my authentic, true self. And I think that's where they start to relate. You can't walk into a boardroom and be that person that just suddenly wants to take over.
Right. Yeah. There's strategy.
Without strategy, there's implications. We learned that in MBA.
I can't remember a thing we learned in MBA, girl.
She was cramming
I was
the
going
entire
through a
time,
divorce
I'm
child, whole courses. There are whole courses I don't remember. So,
And you know, like my prof always says to me, like, no matter what circumstance you're in, he says, don't open your mouth. Always put your brain into gear and then think and then open your mouth.
Yeah.
Because the moment you open your mouth, in that moment of passion or anger or whatever it is, it will always be held against you.
Oh, she's emotional.
yeah,
Yeah, put your brain into gear
yeah.
and then open your mouth.
Let's talk about men that have been allies. Because I feel like also sometimes we bash a lot without acknowledging those men that are allies in our careers. And I've got a story, but I want to hear from you guys. If you were to pick one man to honor and say, you know, in my career, there was this person that did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for me. An ally, a sponsor, a mentor. Who was that?
That's a tough one, Sam.
Why? It shouldn't be tough.
But you're assuming that we've had allies, and if we can't think from the top of our head, I'm just trying to think.
But
who
you're
would have
Game of
been.
Thrones, buddy.
That was just my way to relate to all the executives. Girl.
So they didn't open doors?
No, but now that I'm thinking about it, my former COO, he's actually the first one that got me into mentoring other girls.
Okay.
He sat me down and he said, hey, Charmaine, you know, my wife runs a charity in Alex, and there are 2 girls who have gone on to study a BSc, and they're struggling because they got into tech thinking that a BSc is the only way to get in.
Right.
And as we know, there's like thousands of avenues to get into tech.
Right.
Can you sit with them because you have some commonalities with them? And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And because he saw that in me as, these are aspirational people you can talk to.
Yeah.
Let me send these girls your way. And they came and shadowed us for about 2 days. So I think having an ally like that who recognizes the things you've overcome and shifts people to you to move the needle. From there, I was like, I want to do this. I want to inspire other girls to get into tech. And so I think if there's a possibility for men to help us in that way and see us, I think because he saw me and I had this capability,
He saw you.
he was able to then give that to me and have that whole program happen at the office. So thank you, former CEO.
Yeah, I feel for me, you know, when I was at university still, Stephen Grootes was running the sports desk at that time.
Stephen Grootes.
Yeah, he's cool. And he actually believed in me. He was like, Leigh-Ann, you can do this. I'm moving over to the news desk. You take over the sports desk. Wow. And that was such an amazing, but he was a friend as well, you know, which also helps. But I think it is about, you know, breaking down those barriers and saying, you can do this. And, you know, even to have someone put that faith in me that I could actually say, actually, I can do this. You know, it's amazing. And then when I eventually went to 702, Dave Jack was in charge of the sports desk, and he was the one that had a connection at Supersport, and he actually organized the audition for me. So I'm very grateful to, I think there's so many people along your path. I mean, there's a woman as well that was amazing at Supersport, Des Flint, who ran the tennis department, and she pushed me for everything. You know, she was my biggest cheerleader. She'd say to me, Leigh-Ann, you are the best. Just remember you are the best. And be like, damn girl, okay, I'll take it. So yeah, you need that along the way. You know, you need people to say, I believe in you and you are amazing. So yeah, thanks to those people because amazing.
Leigh-Ann? Not Leigh-Ann, you're Dr. Taheera, of course. I know that.
Look, I think for me, it's not just one person. I had different men as my journey went ahead. So there's quite a few of them, but it's going to be too long for me to mention. But I would say the most promising one was Prof. Buchman. He was the head of obstetrics at Bera. And when I arrived there as a medical officer, he saw my skill and he saw what I could become, and he had that belief in me. And I felt like, oh no, I'm just going to finish my 6 months and then off I go and try and do something else. But he was the one that said, why don't you write your diploma in obstetrics? And then I was like, oh, Prof, you know what, I don't really want to. Then he's like, no, just write your diploma, then I'll sign you off for obstetrics, then you can do family medicine. And he didn't sign me off, he made me do another 6 months.
And then changing the benchmark.
And then he was like, no, there's interviews, you need to prepare your CV for Reg Post. And there had been some medical officers that had been in the department for 3 or 4 years. And I was just that new, brand spanking new girl from Limpopo. And he said, go to the interview. And I was like, I'm never going to get this. Then I went to the interview, and one of the guys that was there for like about 4 years, he's like, you shouldn't come here, don't waste your time, you're never going to get this post. I've been here for 5 years, and I'm going to get this post.
He was sure of himself.
So I was like, okay, whatever, but I'm just going to do this interview for my prof. Did the interview, came out, and I was like, if I get the post, I'm going to get more money. I was like, end game, money, and then as soon as I get into another specialty, radiology or dermatology, I'm out of here. And then the 4 years went by so quickly, and Prof and his wife, Carlin, helped me with my master's in medicine, and I did that as well, surgical skills, and I finished my time within 4 years, wrote my exams, and yeah.
And look at you now.
And then I was a consultant in the department, a very young consultant.
Yeah. My story is of when I was leaving the bank.
Yeah.
The only bank I've ever worked for, the Zebra. And I remember everyone was just like, Samke, where are you going? What are you doing? You know, you're doing so well. You've just finished your MBA. You know,
Looking up for you.
Yeah, like, come on, let's talk. And I was like, no. When I was doing my dissertation, I realized that, you know, there are women that look like me because I did a dissertation on over-indebtedness and the factors that contribute to over-indebtedness. And, you know, my study and the literature review and the research showed that black females are the most likely over-indebted, you know, perfect storm of earning the least of all the population groups, you know, a rise in female-headed households, and, you know, they're raising children by themselves, they're leaving marriages that aren't working out, and so you've got this, you know, combination of factors that leaves people in a position where I don't earn as much as my peers. I've got more outflows than my peers, and I'm trying to figure things out by myself. And so I was like, no, I'm leaving because I, you know, had started speaking. I was being booked to speak. I was being paid to
There's a fire burning in me.
Yeah, I was like, my mission. Honey, listen, I'm all for missions, but sometimes you need to check your balance sheet before you jump. But anyway, that's besides the point. The point is, the then CEO, Stephen Kostoff, was like, why the hell are you leaving? I'm like, no. Then I did a little presentation for him.
Oh, wow.
He had called me for lunch. Yes, because he had called me for lunch and stay ready so you don't need to get ready, child. So I was like, well, this is exactly why. Studies show that 72% of and then he was like, well, if you're so convinced by what you're doing and the need to help people, why don't you start in our organization? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're hired. You're joining the employee wellness program. Literally, my first client as an entrepreneur was the employer I was leaving. Wow. Thanks to Stephen Kostoff.
Male allies, everyone.
Male allies are so important.
May we all have them.
May we all have them. May we all seek them out. And may we all walk into a room expecting the best from everyone in the room, whether they be male, whether they be female, whether they be young, whether they be old. Let's walk in expecting the best of them, and let's walk in looking for common ground for us to jump off of.